At 2 a.m., my phone began lighting the bedroom in cold little bursts, one after another, until the ceiling looked like it was being struck by silent lightning. I reached for it half awake, thinking something had happened to my mother's old lake house, because only emergencies came through that hard at night. Instead, I found 60 photos from Lila Prescott, my husband's mistress, arriving in a neat, cruel stream that felt less like impulse and more like a plan. The first message under them read, "Grant said you would cry, but you would still stay quiet." I did not look where she wanted me to look. That was the first mercy I gave myself. I looked past her smile, past Grant's shirt collar, past the staged proof that he had chosen another woman, and I saw the room behind them with a clarity that made my stomach go still. They were inside Carter Lake House, inside the reading room my mother had paid to restore before she died. With the brass plaque beside the fireplace and the old green chair, she never let anyone move. Then I saw the bracelet. It was on Lila's wrist, loose against her skin, bright under the lamp beside my mother's favorite stack of winter novels. My mother's silver bracelet had a tiny nick near the clasp from the summer she caught it on the dock railing, and I knew that mark before I knew my own wedding ring. Lila had not borrowed jewelry from a man in love. She had been handed a dead woman's memory by a husband who thought my silence made everything in my life available. Another message came through while I sat upright in the dark. She wrote, "I thought you should know what he really wants," then sent a laughing face like this was a game, and I was the last person invited. My hands shook once, not from weakness, but because the body recognizes disrespect before pride has time to dress it up. I opened a folder on my laptop, named it 2 a.m., saved every photo, every timestamp, every message, then separated the private images from the only one I would ever need. By the time the last photo arrived, I had stopped breathing like a wife waiting for an explanation. I was breathing like a woman reading evidence. Lila had sent 60 photos hoping one of them would break me, but she had been careless in the way people get careless when they think they have already won. She thought the cruelest part was Grant beside her, when the truth was sitting quietly on her wrist. Grant came home after 7 with the quiet of a man who had rehearsed his excuse. His coat hung over one arm. His hair was damp, and Lila's perfume reached my kitchen before he did. I stood at the counter with cooling coffee, my phone face down. The 2 a.m. folder closed. He kissed the air near my cheek and murmured. The recording ran late, like another woman had not spent the night wearing my mother's bracelet. He opened the refrigerator and reached for juice he never drank unless he needed something to do with his hands. Grant Whitcomb always looked innocent when he was arranging himself for judgment. Shoulders loose, voice warm, eyes checking my face. The old version of me might have offered one soft question, one chance for him to confess without losing the performance of being decent. That morning, I gave him only enough silence to make him careless. "We have the Northline Gala tonight," he reminded me, setting the carton down untouched. "Lila will be shooting donor portraits, and I need the room to feel easy. Maeve." Easy meant no hard questions, no visible wound, no wife making the host look like a man who had spent the night elsewhere. He added that I should wear gray, because the evening was about the reading program, not personal tension. That was when the cold part settled. Grant was not only bringing his mistress into the event, he was asking me to make her entrance feel respectable. He needed my donor list, my family name, my lake house, and my composure laid over his affair like linen. I looked at him and asked, "Lila is part of the evening now?" His smile came back too quickly. "She understands the younger audience, and she makes us look current." By us, he meant himself. The podcast, the donors, and the version of Northline where I stayed outside the frame. He thought tonight would prove I could still be managed, but he had placed Lila where the room could see her. By mid-morning, I was in the small office behind Northline Reading Trust with Beth Donnelly across from me and Martin Keller beside the filing cabinet, both looking at my laptop without touching it. I did not show them all 60 photos, because parts of my humiliation did not belong in anyone else's hands. I opened the message thread, the timestamps, the lake house access record, and one cropped image where Lila's wrist rested beside the Carter reading room plaque. Beth's face changed first, not with gossip, but recognition. Because she had seen that silver bracelet on my mother before, cancer made her hands too thin. Martin leaned closer, calm in the way good attorneys become calm when anger needs a place to stop. "You are not using the private photos," he said, and it was not a question. "No," I answered, keeping my eyes on the bracelet in the cropped frame. "The parts she wanted me to stare at will stay buried, but the part she forgot to hide belongs to me." Beth exhaled once, sharp through her nose, then turned to the access log as if fury was useful after it learned to read. The record was simple enough to hurt. Grant had opened Carter Lake House with the key code issued for Northline retreat use, not personal access. The email beneath it showed his request from months earlier. Careful. Promising the property would support donor conversations about reading programs and winter student access. Then came Lila's photo from the same room, her wrist bright under the lamp, my mother's bracelet almost touching the plaque that carried the Carter name. Martin tapped the policy and told me the clean case was not adultery. It was misuse of access, donor trust, and family property. Beth wanted to know how far I was willing to go. I looked at the cropped photo again, at the tiny nick beside the clasp. The mark no stranger would notice unless the bracelet had been loved for years. "I do not need the whole world to see what she sent," I said. "I only need the right room to understand what they used." The Northline Gala was held in a brick arts center near the river, the kind of place that made bad behavior look expensive if everyone kept their voice low. Warm lights sat over linen tables. Donors crossed the room with winter coats on their arms. And Grant stood at the entrance like the evening had been made for him. He shook every hand with that easy podcast voice, thanking people for believing in books, access, and children who needed someplace bright after school. Lila stood beside him with her camera on one shoulder, smiling like a woman who thought belonging could be worn if the room stayed polite. Then I saw my mother's bracelet on her wrist. It flashed each time Lila lifted the camera, silver against her skin. The small nick near the clasp, catching light the way it used to catch on my mother's sleeve. A woman near the donor table noticed it too, because her eyes moved from Lila's wrist to my face and stayed there. Grant stepped toward me before the moment could breathe and brushed his cheek near mine, murmuring, "You look calm, Maeve." Like calm was a favor I still owed him. Lila tilted her camera down and gave me a smile, soft enough for strangers, sharp enough for me. "I did not think you would come," she offered, her fingers resting over the bracelet as if she had forgotten where it came from and remembered why it mattered. I looked at her wrist, then at the room Grant had filled with my family name, and answered, "Some things are quiet when they are taken, but they still have an owner." Her smile held for half a second, then slipped enough to show the person underneath it. Inside the ballroom, my name card had been moved 2 seats from the center table, close enough to appear included and far enough to be corrected without making a scene. Grant leaned in, voice low. "Please do not make this uncomfortable." I sat where he had placed me, because the placement itself was evidence. He thought he had arranged the evening around my silence, but he had only arranged Lila where everyone could see her hand. Grant took the stage under the warm lights and became the man everyone thought they knew. His voice softened around words like trust, access, and children who needed a place to read when winter closed in early. Lila sat below him with my mother's bracelet on her wrist, her camera in her lap like she had earned the right to preserve the night. I watched Grant lift one hand toward the donors and speak about opening doors, while the key code he had misused sat in Beth's file. I did not move when the program shifted into the Carter Reading Room tribute. Beth had handled it quietly, and Celia Wren had approved the correction because the board deserved clean records more than Grant deserved a smooth evening. The first image on the screen was Carter Lake House, white against the dark water, with my mother's name beneath the reading room plaque. The second was the access record, stripped of everything unnecessary except the restricted use label. Grant Whitcomb and Lila Prescott. The room changed before anyone spoke. People did not gasp, because rooms like that are trained not to gasp, but shoulders tightened and glasses lowered halfway to linen. Then the cropped photo appeared. Only Lila's wrist beside the plaque. The bracelet bright enough for every woman who had noticed it at the door to understand. No private photo appeared. No dirty image was needed. Lila stared at the screen, then covered her wrist too late. And that motion told the room she knew what she had been wearing. Grant tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "This is a private matter," he began, already reaching for the version where I was emotional and he was reasonable. Celia rose from the board table before I had to answer. Northline Property Access and Donor Trust are not private marital language. Grant. Not when they are used this way. His face tightened because Celia had named the door he could not charm open. Lila unclasped the bracelet with shaking fingers. I placed a folded napkin on the table, and she set it there without meeting my eyes. I did not snatch it back, because stolen things look smaller when you have to wrestle for them. I only said, tonight was never about punishing anyone. It was about putting the truth back where it belonged. By morning, the story was moving without one private photo attached to it. What traveled through donor texts and local arts group chats was cleaner and worse. Lila's wrist under the gala lights, my mother's bracelet beside the Carter Reading Room plaque, and the old foundation photo of my mother wearing the same silver clasp. People did not need the rest. They had the part Lila had forgotten to fear. Grant called before I finished my first coffee. His voice came tight, stripped of the warmth he used when a room still belonged to him. "You need to say this was a misunderstanding. Maeve, you need to tell Celia we handled it badly, but privately." I looked at the message Beth had just sent, showing 2 sponsors asking whether Grant would still represent Northline, and I heard the old trick in his panic. When he was praised, Northline was his work, but when he was cornered, it became something I was hurting. Martin's notice reached Grant before noon. His access to Carter Lake House was withdrawn. His name was removed from upcoming Northline introductions, and he was instructed not to represent the trust while the board reviewed his use of the property. Beth moved the next reading event to another host before Grant could call it temporary. Celia's board note was short enough to cut clean. The grants would continue. Donor relationships would be protected, and the trust would not confuse one man's image with its mission. Lila tried to save herself that afternoon. Her statement said she had been misled by a powerful man and never meant to hurt anyone. But the sentence could not stand beside her own 2A. Message. She wanted tears. That was not gossip. Not interpretation. Not a jealous wife's rewrite. It was her evidence. In her words, sent before consequence taught her caution. By evening, clients were not denouncing her in public, which would have given her another stage. They simply stopped asking her to shoot rooms where trust mattered anymore. Lila asked to meet near the lake, in a coffee shop where the windows sweated from heat and everyone spoke softly over paper cups. She came without a camera, without lipstick sharp enough to hide behind, and without my mother's bracelet. A phone rested in her hand, and a small envelope sat flat beneath it. I let her sit across from me because Grant's story had finally started costing her enough to make honesty useful. "Grant told me your marriage was over," she began, fingers pressed around the cup she had not touched. "He said you controlled him, that the lake house was basically his, that the bracelet was something old, no one cared about. I listened because I wanted the exact shape of the lie he had sold her. When she added that she never meant to hurt me, I turned my phone toward her and let her read her own message from 2A. She wanted tears. Her face lost what little color the cold had left in it. I did not raise my voice. You may have believed some of what he told you, Lila, but you chose the part where another woman cried alone. She looked down, and for the first time, there was no performance in the silence between us. I wanted to win, she admitted, almost too quietly. I liked thinking he picked me, and I liked thinking you were the woman he had outgrown. The words were ugly because they were finally true. She slid the envelope toward me with voice notes, screenshots, and messages showing Grant had hoped the photos would push me into a quiet separation before the gala season touched his name. He thought if I saw enough, I would protect the trust to protect myself. Lila swallowed and asked what happened to her now. Like consequences were something I controlled with one sentence. I told her, say the truth where you lied. She left first, shoulders smaller under her beige coat. I stayed long enough to watch the lake darken beyond the glass, then placed the envelope in my bag without opening it there. I did not feel victory. I felt the weight of proof becoming cleaner than pain. Lila asked to meet near the lake, in a coffee shop where the windows fogged from heat and everyone spoke softly over paper cups. She came without a camera, without the sharp lipstick she used at donor events, and without my mother's bracelet. A phone rested in her hand, and a small envelope sat beneath it, like something she had finally become tired of carrying. I let her sit because Grant's version had started costing her enough to make the truth useful. Grant told me your marriage was over. She began, both hands around a cup she had not touched. He said you controlled him, that Carter Lake House was basically his, that the bracelet was old and no one cared about it. I listened because I wanted the exact shape of the lie he had sold her. When she added that she never meant to hurt me, I turned my phone toward her and let her read her own message from 2A. She wanted tears. Her face lost what little color the cold had left in it. I did not raise my voice, because the words on the screen had already done the work. You may have believed some of what Grant told you, Lila, but you chose the part where another woman cried alone. She looked down, and for the first time, there was no performance in the silence between us. I wanted to win, she admitted, almost too quietly, and I liked thinking he had outgrown you. She slid the envelope toward me with voice notes, screenshots, and messages showing Grant hoped the photos would push me into a quiet separation before gala season touched his name. He thought if I saw enough, I would protect the trust to protect myself. Lila asked what happened to her now. Like consequences were something I controlled with one sentence. I told her, say the truth where you lied, then took the envelope and left without giving her forgiveness to use as a costume. If you have ever stayed quiet so someone else could look decent, remember this. Peace does not begin when they understand you. Peace begins when you stop standing in a room built from your own shrinking.